please could you tell me more about how you see the wealth tax working?
Yeah, this is a really interesting question, right? So me and the people I work with, like Patriotic Millionaires, we campaign for 2% wealth tax above 10 million. It's not on income, it's on the wealth that you own. So all of your assets minus your debt, 2% a year. I think sometimes people time a little bit too strictly to that, like it has to be this specific form of wealth tax. The most important thing is that whatever tax you bring in is effectively targeted at really, really the richest. We're not talking about bankers, doctors, lawyers, heaven forbid, LBC presenters.
God, I
We're
wish.
talking about phenomenally wealthy people with wealth of 100 million, 1 billion pounds. You need to focus on these people. We talk about a wealth tax, a tax on wealth. There's other ways of doing it. We could talk about taxing very, very large fortunes at the point of inheritance. But really, you need to tax the richest people in society, the asset holders, because if you don't tax them, their wealth will grow at a phenomenal rate and they will outcompete the middle class. And what that means is your kids can't have houses. So realistically, I'm not religious about exactly one or another form of wealth tax. I'm trying to make the case that we need some form of wealth tax. And what I want is for the public to get behind me so that I can force the government to do the work on making the plan so that this tax works effectively. I know it will be difficult. It's not easy to design. It's going to take probably 1 or 2 years to design. But you need to start doing it now so that you're ready before the next election. Otherwise, Labour are going to lose very badly.
Julie?
I totally agree. I worry that I'm Generation X, and I worry that I'm not going to outlive my parents. I just don't think that because of the wealth distributed so badly between the classes, it's like all the services, the NHS, things that we just rely on even without our jobs and our work and our wages. It's just everything is geared towards people that already have enough, and the greed and the capitalism, and I'm sick of it. So I'm with you, Gary.
Thank you very much, Julie. Thanks, you.
That's a nice start, Julie. Thank you very much indeed. Can I probe some of the way in which this might work?
Yeah.
So you talk about, I think it's a tax of 2% on wealth over 10 million.
Yeah.
Roughly how many people in the country have that kind of wealth? And
It's
so
not
what
an enormous
would
number of people.
What would that tax produce?
It's not an enormous number of people. We think it would bring something sort of like 20, 30 billion. Depends exactly how you do it. But this tax, it's not specifically about raising revenue. What this is about stopping the aggressive growth in the wealth of the very rich. I don't know if you remember the first time we ever spoke, you and I, Tom. Do you remember when it was?
I've got a fair idea.
It was in 2020, beginning of COVID. I called into your show and I told you we were going to have an enormous cost of living crisis, an enormous inflation crisis. Do you remember what the papers were saying at the time?
Oh, God, I can't remember.
Roaring 20s,
yes,
pent-up demand.
But they hadn't clocked COVID was coming, I don't think, at that point.
No, this was during COVID. This was
during
6
the
months into COVID. Yeah, that's when I called you first, yeah. Because what I recognise, which is the reason that I'm a multimillionaire, is if you allow inequality to increase massively, what that means is the rich buy everything. Mm-hmm. The rich buy everything from the middle class. The rich buy everything from the government. If you want your kids to afford houses, you cannot allow a future where the rich own everything. You can't give the rich everything and expect your kids to own something.
So if this isn't... So on the raising revenue point, you say it would bring in about 25 billion a year.
Yeah.
That's...
not enough.
That's not a lot.
I know it's not
That's
enough.
2% of government spending.
Listen,
so why are you saying 2% on that
I know
wealth?
it's not enough.
Yeah.
I know that.
So
I'm aware of that.
So why...
If you don't get the 2%, this country will collapse. If you get the 2%, the country will collapse slower. Really,
okay, so what should it be?
What you need is much more. You need to look at how do we really aggressively tax the richest in the country much more. And I don't say that because I want to do that, Tom. I say that as one of the best economists in the world because I'm betting on if you don't do that, the economy will collapse. NHS collapses. Spending... education collapses. You cannot... Listen, if you have a wealth of £1 billion, what's your passive income?
What's your passive income?
Passive income, if you have a wealth of £1 billion.
Depends where you're getting it from. Depends how much of it you're
50 million
using.
a year, 5%, 50 million, 1 million a week. Right. If you had 1 million a week passive income, how much would you spend?
God, loads.
Yeah, how much?
I don't know. I've got 100 grand. These are numbers that are so astronomical.
Tom Swarbrick goes absolutely mental, spends £500,000 a week, right? That means you still have £500,000 a week to do what with? Buy the rest of the assets.
Sure.
You cannot allow these people to accumulate the wealth.
So what do you want it to be? If 2% on wealth above that threshold, and we can get into how that wealth is measured.
Yeah.
If it's not 2%, because that just doesn't bring in enough, what does it need to be?
I think when you're talking about the very, very, very rich, I think you need to look at reducing the ways they avoid taxes. I think you need to look at inheritance taxes on the very, very rich. I think you need to look at... You simply cannot allow... If you have one group of society that increases its share of ownership to 100%, then that means the rest of society reduces its ownership to 0%. Now, I don't know if you're a billionaire, Tom, but I assume you want your future kids to own houses, and so do I.
Yeah.
And you cannot have that if you... Listen...
You're richer than I am, Gary, by multiple levels.
Look at human history. Most of human history is a tiny, tiny, super wealthy elite, and the vast majority of people desperately impoverished. And that's the most of the current world as well, okay? My grandma grew up in London, in the richest country in the world, and 3 of her siblings died of tuberculosis, disease of poverty. That will happen again if you allow the rich to take everything.
I know you're a proponent of wealth taxes. I've followed a lot of your work. The YouTube's great, by the way. But just from your perspective as an economist, do you have any other ideas or policies that you can put forward to the people in charge other than just the wealth taxes?
You know, there's loads of things which are being talked about now, and they're talking about it now because the government desperately needs money. There's things like equalising capital gains and income tax, which I think is something that they might do. I think there's talk about reducing tax loopholes is an obvious thing. Tax exemptions, especially on things like inheritance tax exemptions, you get situations where the richest people pay nothing by putting money into trusts. I think we can dive into exemptions and we can get rid of them. The reality is you need to do something. In this budget in November, what we are going to get is probably a tax raid on the middle class and the upper middle class, and we're probably going to see nothing serious done about the super rich, the billionaires. It's absurd, really. There's lots of things you can do, but if you don't deal with the top end, then you don't fix that problem. What you're going to see in November is the middle class taxed so that the government can give that money to the rich to convince the rich to keep the welfare state going for another 5 years. You need to do something about that top end.
And you would say that rich means assets of more than 10... having more than 10 million a year in assets.
I mean, there's obviously not one cut-off point in which you wake up and suddenly you're rich. If you go to bed with 9999999, 9 million, you're still pretty rich. What I want is genuine progressivity. What I don't want is a situation we have now where somebody like me, somebody like yourself, works hard, makes good money, has to pay 50-60%, and the Duke of Westminster inherits 10 billion and pays nothing. If that's the system that you have, I can guarantee you in 20 years the rich will own everything.
Well, he's inherited billions of pounds, but he does pay tax. He pays tax in lots of different ways, and there would have been inheritance tax.
What would you say is his percentage taxes paid on his lifetime income that he's received?
No idea.
I would be a strong seller at 5%. These guys pay virtually nothing on total lifetime income,
even if he's earned it.
Well, I mean, he receives. So
he
from
would,
his dad,
if he earns money through work, he would have to pay income tax.
If you inherit £10 billion, then your lifetime work income is a very small percentage of your lifetime income.
So how would you go after that 10 billion?
I think there's lots of different ways you can do it. I think wealth taxes is one way. Wealth tax is one way we support. I think inheritance taxes on huge hoarded assets is another thing. I think you need to look at hoarded wealth. You need to tax wealth hoarding. You need to tax wealth hoarding in one form or another.
Let's get to George in Worcester. George?
Hi, thanks. Cheers, Tom. Hi, Gary. I earn £8 an hour as a self-employed. I'm 43 years old. I've got no pension, no holiday pay, no sick pay. But my main concern is immigration. I want to stop immigration altogether. I don't think you're going to achieve anything, Gary, because a lot on your side, they just keep calling us names. People with my concerns, they just call us names. They belittle our concerns as well. So we're at like an impasse. You're probably I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you're correct on your economic prospectus, but the fact that so many on your side just belittle us, call us names, belittle our concerns, just means that we're never going to come to your side. Until people with your economic viewpoint start taking our cultural concerns more seriously, there will always be this impasse. I have never heard anyone say that they want a wealth tax and that they also want to stop the immigrants coming in.
Yeah, I do worry that you might be right, George, to be honest. I live near Canary Wharf, and there's one of these migrant hotels near where I live, in Canary Wharf, and my cameraman told me there was one of these protests the other day. So I went down, the cameraman who shoots my YouTube, I went down after I shot the YouTube, and I went there to this hotel, and there was the protesters on one side, and there was the counter-protesters on the other side. And yeah, to be honest, it was, as you say, George, it's two groups of people standing on opposite sides of the road, pointing at each other and calling each other names. And I worried when I saw that was a little bit of the vision of the future of this country. I'm an economist, right, and I stick to economics. I'm not an expert on immigration. I think the primary economic concern is growing wealth inequality. I'm very confident on that. But I think if people such as yourself, George, want there to be low rates of immigration, you've got every right to say that, and you've got every right to believe that. And I do worry that this growing division is going to tear our country apart, and it's going to prevent people like me from getting the change that I need. And what that will mean, George, is that people like you and people like your kids will suffer very much economically. And I worry, and this is what keeps me up at night, to be honest, George. How do I convince the public? I don't, this reminds me of Brexit. My brother was very anti-Brexit. My dad was very pro-Brexit. And I saw these fights at the dinner table. And when I saw what was happening outside this hotel, this is my country, And I don't hate people on either side of that road. I'm not an expert in immigration, and I'm probably never going to be. But I'll tell you this one thing right now. If the ordinary hard-working people of this country allow themselves to be divided on this issue, then the current state of play will continue, which is rich people getting richer and richer and richer and richer, while working class people get poorer and poorer and poorer.
I've got a 4-year-old and I've got a 10-year-old. Now, hypothetically, if that 2% tax does occur on the wealth tax, and that does affect the economy, what sort of advice would you give to me as a 37-year-old to teach to my children in years to come? What should I be teaching them?
Yeah, if we get that tax, then I think that opens up a lot of space. I think it will enable us to protect public services. I think it will make it a little bit easier for ordinary people like yourself, like your kids, to buy housing.
On 2% of government spending?
Oh, listen, 2%, I've told you.
It's nothing.
No, it's not 2% of government spend. Listen, it's not enough.
It's
but
25 billion a year.
Stop that increase in inaffordability of housing, because that inaffordability of housing is being driven by the growing wealth of the rich, Tom.
In part, yes, it's a scarcer resource because it's being bought up by people who have the money to buy it up. But we're not building any. The house building in London has effectively collapsed. The reason why is the developers say that it's impossible to get the planning permission quickly. If we're going to reduce the cost of housing, we've got to build more homes. And if part of the reason we can't build more homes is it takes too long and the planning applications are appallingly bureaucratic, we've got to cut that.
Tom, just quickly on that, before I go back to Tobias's question.
Sorry, yes, of course.
Can you name me one city in the world which built its way out of the housing crisis?
Which built its way out of the housing
crisis?
Well, it depends what you mean by out of.
Built enough houses that housing became more affordable over time in the last 20, 30 years?
Well, there are lots of places in which housing is far more affordable than here, lots of other countries in which there's, and far less scarce.
Like where?
Well, I don't know, like in Australia, for example, or in other parts of Europe.
So you think housing's affordable in Australia?
I think housing is more affordable in Australia than it is here, yes.
Significantly more?
What do you mean by significant?
Listen, so I've worked all over the world with people from all over the world. I've got YouTube channel watched all over the world, and I constantly get people who think the housing crisis is just in their country. People in London think that, people in New York think that, people in Sydney think that, people in Melbourne think that, people in Vancouver think that, people in LA think that, people in Mumbai think that, people in Tokyo think that, people in Shanghai think that. It's a global problem. You don't build your way out of a global problem. It's a global problem.
So the answer to the housing crisis is not to build more homes?
You need to protect yourself from the billionaires. If you are competing with billionaires...
You've got to build more homes.
I know that's a very easy answer, right? But listen, I make a lot of money betting on the economy, and I think you're wrong, Tom. I'm not saying we don't build more homes. I'm not against building more homes, right? But look, go out in London, right? Go to... Listen, I don't know where you grew up. I grew up in a place called Ilford, right? Mm-hmm. Street, small terraced houses, right? Go to that street now, every single house, expanded up, expanded back, massive blocks of flats blocking out the sun. Is Ilford more affordable? No. No, it's not. You don't build your way out. Listen, all you do is you turn my home city into a slum. That's all you do. That's all you do, Tom. Listen, and I know that's not the answer you want, Tom, but there's a reason that I make millions of pounds betting on the economy, because I'm good at this, right? And I'll tell you right now, you're not going to build your way out of it. And housing will become less affordable unless we deal with the problem of rapidly increasing wealth of the rich. It's not just housing, Tom. Look at the stock markets. Look at the gold price. Look at land prices. Every single asset class in the entire world has increased massively in the last 5 years, in the last 20 years. This is not a problem of housing. This is not a problem of London housing. This is a problem of ordinary people's inability to compete with a massively growing, wealthy, super rich class.